So what are we gonna be looking at today? Wait, let me pull off my thing. Okay, so today we're gonna be looking at the siege of Constantinople. Yo, wait, legit though? Wait, oh my goodness. Dude, that sucks for the Romans, man. I think I joked last video, like, they even, like, supported Mehmed, and Mehmed's gonna turn around and immediately besiege them. That sucks. The Romans, man. These poor guys.
The 27-year-old Sultan Mehmed I began his reign by reassembling the ranks of his personal council by appointing men to positions of power who had supported his cause during the last decade. The leading groups that benefited from this restructuring in government were the Turkoman Ghazi warriors and notables of Anatolia, who had long been neglected during the years of the Thunderbolt, but had since regrouped around the new Sultan. It was these Turkomans who had made up the core of Mehmed's army during the wars of the last decade, and it would be they who were now to play a vital role in his government for the foreseeable future. The new Sultan also reaffirmed the Treaty of Gallipoli with the Byzantines and Genoese, as was his promise to Manuel II for his military assistance during his war effort against Musa. As a result of all these political developments, the formerly influential Capiculu and Devshirme military and political classes were reduced in size and sidelined in the new Ottoman administration, as many of their Timar holdings were seized and redistributed by the state. With his internal affairs settled at home, Mehmed turned his gaze eastward as he sought to establish Ottoman control over a war-torn Anatolia, a region which had, during the last decade, seen many of its settlements and pastures brutally ransacked. Not wanting to invoke the wrath of the Timurids as his father did with his speedy conquest of Anatolia during the 1390s, the Ottoman Sultan opted for a more subtle form of land expansion through vassalization. During the early months of 1414, the Ottoman Sultan personally led an army along the Aegean coast of the plateau, overwhelming the Turkic beyliks of the area in a single military campaign. The Sarukhan and Aydinid beyliks were officially annexed into the Ottoman realm, while Menteşe and the Gurmiyanids were vassalized. The former ruler of the Aydinids, Junayd Bey, who had been a critical ally of both Suleiman Çelebi and Musa Çelebi during the interregnum, was forgiven for his past actions against Edirne and was given the vital governorship of Nicopolis. After re-establishing Ottoman rule in western Anatolia, Mehmed marched on the Jandarid Beylik of Esfendiya Bey, who had sided with Timur during the Battle of Ankara.
Okay, so overall, I have to say, I really do think Mehmed is definitely on the rise, and his idea of reconquering Anatolia is pretty smarter. Like I said, Bayezid definitely blitzed Anatolia, just took it all, you know? And that was the cause of so much of his troubles, as he came into conflict with, the Timurid Empire, which seems to be completely different now, because I heard it kind of fell apart after Timur's death and whatnot. But, many of the Anatolian former holdings turned on Bayezid. So I think Mehmed's idea of vassalization and a more subtle expansion is definitely off the bat much better than brute forcing and taking everything, and annexing it into his empire.
And vassalized his state, in addition to the beyliks of Janik along the Black Sea coast. In response to a failed Karamanid siege on Bursa while he was campaigning against Musa in the Balkans back in
During the siege, the Karamanids reportedly desecrated Bayezid in Bursa and buried his remains, retaliating for execution for their last ruler in 1398. Oh wow, the disrespect. The Karamanids were always very bold in their uprisings, but dang.
In 1413, the Ottoman Sultan declared war against Mehmed II Bey at the start of 1415 as retribution for invading his lands. However, due to intense spring rains hampering his siege on Konya, Mehmed concluded a hasty peace with the Karamanid ruler, which saw him regain the towns of Agadir, Akşehir and Beyşehir back for the Sultanate. Returning to Edirne victorious, with much of Anatolia once again under the Ottoman fold, Mehmed began planning out military operations into the Balkans to reassert Muslim power projection into the region after many years of Ottoman military inactivity. First pushing deep into the decentralized principalities of Albania, Mehmed captured the regional towns of Vlora and Kruja, reaching the coast of the Adriatic by 1417. Ottoman raids deep into Bosnia, Morea and Transylvania also recommenced during this period, as the Sultan sought to please his Turkoman Ghazi warriors with the riches of the local region. Mehmed likewise launched a war against Wallachia, as its ruler, Mircea I, had been a critical ally of Musa during the interregnum, and thus had to be punished. The following hostilities were short, as the ailing 60-year-old voivode wished to keep the peace with Edirne, and so signed a peace treaty that saw him ceding the crucial Danube fortress town of Juju and the region of Dobruja to Mehmed. In addition to territorial concessions, Wallachia also became an official vassal of Edirne, which compelled it to once again pay a yearly tribute to the Ottoman state. Better yet for Mehmed, by 1418, Mircea of Wallachia, the man who had dealt 2 defeats to Bayezid within a year and had been a thorn in Ottoman expansion for over 20 years, had died of natural causes.
Yeah, I really liked Mircea, and overall the guy was just an interesting underdog who again handed Bayezid 2 elds. Like, he knew how to fight, but it seems like at the end there he just kind of didn't want to. He kind of just conceded almost without a fight just to Mehmed. I mean, granted, he was old and, you know, kind of like, I guess he just wanted to hold the peace, but he kind of gave away Wallachian independence for the most part. I mean, they're still in existence, but they're now a vassal, you know, which he, you know, unfortunately at the end, he didn't seem to have the resolve to keep fighting.
It was also during this period that the newly emerging Ottoman fleet began conducting major naval operations in the wider region for the first time in its history. Since the end of the interregnum, many Ottoman coastal settlements and merchant ships in the Aegean had been harassed by various corsair groups stationed in the many island colonies of the Venetians. As a result, Edirne began its own military operations against Venice, as a newly built galley fleet headed by Chali Bey raided the Venetian islands of Andros, Paros, Milos and Evia between 1414 and 1415. As hostilities escalated during the spring of 1416, the combined fleets of both nations met at the mouth of the Dardanelles Strait. The admiral of the Venetian fleet, Pietro Loredan, had been given strict orders to protect Venice's commercial interests in the local region, in addition to opening peace talks with Edirne. However, once his fleet of 10 galleys entered the strait, he was faced with immense Ottoman opposition from all sides. For over 2 days, Turkish archers on land and the main Ottoman fleet of Chali Bey, stationed at Gallipoli, skirmished with Loredan's fleet. In spite of its numerical advantage on sea and land, the infant navy of Mehmed I still lacked the skills and tactics to go up against one of the premier naval powers in Europe. As a result, a ceasefire between the 2 fleets was established on May 28th, as plans to escort the Venetian ambassadors to the Ottoman capital were being drafted. While the planning over the matter took place, a certain development in the form of a ship would have unintended consequences for the ongoing peace process. On May 29th, a neutral merchant ship from Lesbos had appeared over the walls of Gallipoli, sailing north to the Roman capital, thus provoking the Venetian fleet into a false pursuit. Believing that the ship was a fellow Turkish vessel in need of help, the Ottoman fleet sailed out of the harbour in outrage to meet Loredan in open battle, as tensions were already high from the previous 2 days. Still, this move to engage the Venetian fleet was to be a total disaster. In a clash lasting the entire day, the Ottoman naval host was to be decimated, with over 4,000 being killed, including Chali Bey himself, and over 1,000 being captured, along with most of the fleet. The engagement that was later to be known as the
Yeah, we know about Venice and the Venetians. You don't mess with them too much on the open sea, especially when they're strong. Though the Ottomans eventually, I remember from the Epic History series, eventually do get incredibly strong on the sea. But, you know, at the moment they're still in their infancy. and then one random ship caused all that. I'll say from what I'm looking at, definitely Mehmed's reign, while also like an interesting political reorganization of power, you know, with the Turkomans and whatnot, also seems to be an era of renewed aggression, such as his successful forefathers, such as Bayezid, conducted. You know, very much he's in the same spirit as the previous sultans in that sense. Renewed aggression, renewed expansion, and being very good at it, so that already like you're seeing the makings of a pretty, so far from what I'm seeing, a good reign. We'll see if he finishes strong though, because Bayezid had a great reign until the very end, you know. But I think so. I think Mehmed might just have a really successful reign.
The Battle of Gallipoli would end all Ottoman naval ambitions in the Aegean for the foreseeable future. With Emperor Manuel II now mediating the peace talks in Constantinople, an official peace treaty between Adana and Venice was to be concluded in 1419, which saw both sides agreeing to the transfers of war prisoners in return for Mehmed recognizing Venice's overseas possessions in the eastern Mediterranean. Unfortunately for Adana, the loss of the war ensured naval superiority for the Republic of Venice in the Aegean Sea for decades to come, as the shattered remains of the Ottoman fleet sailed back into the harbour of Gallipoli. In addition to military developments abroad, a series of political developments at home would consume a large portion of Sultan Mehmed I's reign. During the Ottoman Sultan's restructuring of personnel in his government at the beginning of his rule, many statesmen who had supported the wrong son of Bayezid were exiled across the Ottoman realm. One of these exiled men was Musa Çelebi's Karayaska, or chief military judge, Sheikh Bedreddin. Being of mixed Muslim and Christian parentage, the military judge had gained a mass following for his utopian, syncretic vision for the Ottoman Sultanate, like his views on the legal equality of all followers of the Abrahamic religions and the communal ownership of property of all peoples. Bedreddin's views spread like wildfire around the Balkans and Anatolia during the years after the Battle of Ankara, as the vast majority of ordinary Ottoman citizens had been plagued with economic instability and war for the last 13 years, and were thus unsatisfied with the central government in Adana. These ongoing political developments were a major internal threat to the Sunni-identifying Ottoman state, which saw itself as the authority on political and religious matters within its holdings. Travelling from Nicaea to the Jandarid Beylik, then Wallachia to Ottoman Bulgaria, the former chief military judge preached his popular message to the peoples of the regions, which soon sparked a full-scale civil rebellion by 1416. In a short period of time, Smyrna, Manisa, and the regions of Dobruja and Sarukan had revolted against Ottoman rule, which saw tens of thousands of Muslims and Christian peasants, madrasa students, and marginalized Kapikulu soldiers joining the ranks of the rebellion. Sheikh Bedreddin.
Yeah, the thing is, like, also with Mehmed, kind of limiting the original ruling class, and, you know, in favor of his more Anatolian Turkoman things, and also just the instability of the fighting, right? The civil war, etc. Like, you often, like, ignore kind of what's going on with the average folk, but just average people are in the middle of all this, getting raided and killed, and just having to live under the instability, and just the frustration that would have for the common people. You know, like, you could see why this message of more equality, even I'm like, well, that's a kind of nice message, you know? Like, more equality for everyone under the Abrahamic religion banner. You know, he's definitely playing on that aspect, and also just the frustrations of the people, and, you know, who had to live under so much battle, war. So you can definitely see all of that. Now I guess Mehmed's in his I gotta stop my, like, rebellion era now.
Bedreddin's rebellion posed a serious challenge to the authority of Sultan Mehmed I during a period when the leader of the Ottomans was trying to reunite the scattered pieces of his father's former realm. A military response led by Grand Vizier Bayezid Pasha and the Sultan's eldest son, Shahzada Murad, was quickly launched against the rebelling regions in Anatolia, and in a short but indiscriminately bloody campaign, all resistance was crushed. Meanwhile, Mehmed launched his own military response against Bedreddin, who was stationed in Dobruja, and won a quick victory over the rebels that saw him capture the rebel leader. After a one-sided trial held in Ceres,
Okay, since the Ottomans had a taboo against harming scholars, a trial was required to obtain approval from other scholars for better execution. Yeah, but like, you know, kind of those faults. Yeah, he never had a chance on.
Sheikh Bedreddin was hanged alongside his followers in a show of Ottoman supremacy to the broader region. The first civil revolt in Ottoman history resulted in the Ottoman regime cracking down on religious orders throughout the state, with Edirne making a direct effort to silence dissenting voices of religious judges and leaders in the Balkans and Anatolia. It was also during this period that a ghost of the past from the Ottoman interregnum reared its ugly head when the last son of Bayezid, Mustafa Çelebi, made his bid for the throne. Being captured alongside his father during the aftermath of the Battle of Ankara.
I completely forgot about this dude. Oh, they called the Timurids or so around. They just completely fell apart after Timur, but they're still just chilling around. I completely forgot about Mustafa. I just remembered, yeah, last video he was taken by Timur, but now he's just chilling. I completely forgot about this dude.
The young Ottoman prince had spent the better part of the last decade in the Timurid capital of Samarkand, before deciding to return to Anatolia. First arriving in Trebizond, Mustafa travelled to the courts of the Jandarid and Karamanid beyliks to seek military and political support against Mehmed. Then, with the help of the Venetians, the youngest son of Bayezid sailed to Ottoman Bulgaria and called on the help of the local Muslim governors and Christian leaders in the region to support his war effort. The former ruler of the Aydinids, Junayd Bey, who had been the governor of Nicopolis since his defeat to Mehmed back in 1414, opened his doors to the rebel prince, and the pair began mustering troops in Ottoman Thessaly while Mehmed was distracted with the Bedreddin rebellion. However, upon hearing the return of Mustafa Çelebi, the Ottoman Sultan started a propaganda campaign against his younger brother by proclaiming him as an impostor and a...
Despite being Bayezid's legitimate son, Mustafa was nicknamed the impostor due to Mehmed's the first effective propaganda. Wow. Yeah, like, I'll say Mehmed definitely, you know, had to essentially help. He's trying to reconstruct an empire that was essentially torn apart from civil war and just, you know, his father's defeat at the hands of the Timurid Empire. So he's definitely fighting an uphill battle of trying to, like, restore and re-strengthen himself, meanwhile dealing with all the frustrations of everyone around him, the rebellions, his brothers. So he's been fighting everyone, and he kind of has to, you know. Yeah.
A false son of Bayezid, as he was a relatively unknown figure by most in Ottoman society. After suppressing Bedreddin's rebellion in Dobruja, Mehmed quickly marched on the mustering forces of Mustafa and defeated him in battle, which saw the rebel Ottoman prince and his followers seeking refuge in Byzantine-controlled Thessalonica. Sending out a petition to Emperor Manuel II, with whom he was on good terms, the Ottoman Sultan demanded the return of his rebellious brother immediately. In a classic example of Byzantine diplomacy, the Emperor of Constantinople instead offered Mehmed to exile Mustafa and his supporters to the island of Lemnos in return for a yearly tribute of 300,000 Ottoman akçe. Knowing he could not afford to be heavy-handed with Byzantium due to the economically uncertain state he found himself in, Mehmed accepted Manuel's terms and returned to Edirne.
Okay, so once again, I do like the Byzantine era of Rome because they do rely a lot on diplomacy, you know, and just finding unique ways to get around that. Though, again, like, you know, we know that the Byzantines and the Romans, I mean, the Romans and the Ottomans are gonna come into conflict again, so it is I guess Manuel has to tread carefully, because he was besieged by, another son of Bayezid in the previous video, so I would just say be careful. Who, especially with Mehmed, like, how you're treating with him. They're on good terms, but at the end of the day, the Romans are... I don't even think they can even raise their own armies that much anymore, so they're definitely in a weaker position.
During the spring of 1421, while on a hunting expedition near the lush forests of Bursa, the 35-year-old Sultan of the Ottomans fell off his horse and was severely paralyzed. Upon returning to the imperial palace and knowing that his days were numbered, Mehmed ordered for his eldest son, Shahzada Murad, who was the governor of Amasya, to come to the former capital city at once to swiftly secure the Ottoman throne from him.
Let me get that again. What the heck? A hunting accident? I'm sorry, let me get that.
In the spring of 1421, while on a hunting expedition near the lush forests of Bursa, the 35-year-old Sultan of the Ottomans fell off his horse and was severely paralyzed.
Dang. This is how he goes out? That's so unglory. Again, another pretty unglorious way to go, and he's so young though. Like, oh, that sucks.
Upon returning to the imperial palace, who was the governor of Amasya, to come to the former capital city at once to swiftly secure the Ottoman throne from him. However, the Ottoman Sultan, who had received over 40 battle wounds over 24 battles in the last 20 years, succumbed to injuries before his son's arrival.
Oh no.
Often regarded as the second founder of the Ottoman state due to his efforts during the interregnum and...
Yeah, you had to give it to Mehmed. He definitely helped bring back a lot of the Ottoman... he helped with the comeback of the Ottoman Empire, right? And the man fought so much, but overcame so many great odds. That's just a crappy way to go, though. I expected him to live a lot longer than that, but oh well.
His reign of stabilization, Sultan Mehmed I would become one of the most respected members of the House of Osman in future generations. Against all odds, the former Ottoman monarch had managed to pick up the scattered pieces of his father's realm from the Battle of Ankara and rebuild a state that was once again in control of its own destiny. For over 42 days, the death of the Sultan was kept a secret by Grand Vizier Bayezid Pasha and his personal staff, as the fears of civil war circulated in the imperial palace. In an unusual series of events, Mehmed's body was put in a litter in order to hide the stench of his decaying body, and during the days in which audiences were held, state officials dressed their former sultan in his imperial regalia and hid behind his cloak to simulate the sultan stroking his beard and moving his arms.
That is wild. But yeah, technically yeah, his brother's still alive, right, in exile, and frickin' his son is there, so yeah, the possibility of a civil war is so strong, isn't it? So like, this is just like them trying their hardest to prevent another one. And respect, they're going all out with this theatrics.
It was only with the arrival of the 17-year-old Murad to the former Ottoman capital of Bursa and his accession to the throne that the news of Mehmed's death was released to the wider public. The ascension of Sultan Murad II during the spring of 1421 came during a period in which there were many competing claimants to the Ottoman throne. Mustafa Çelebi and his supporters were still in exile on the Byzantine island of Lemnos. Orhan Çelebi, the grandson of Suleiman Çelebi from the Ottoman interregnum, resided in Constantinople, while the future fates of Mehmed I's other three sons, Shahzadis Mustafa, Mahmud and Yusuf, were up in the air. The practice of fratricide by Ottoman monarchs had already been institutionalized by the 15th century, and thus the former Ottoman Sultan had taken precautions against it by appointing his second eldest son, Mustafa, to the faraway governorship of Isparta, while his younger sons, Mahmud and Yusuf, were transferred to the protection of Constantinople. The premature death of Mehmed I also coincided with the deterioration of Ottoman-Byzantine relations, as by 1421, the ailing 71-year-old Manuel II had given control of many of the functions of the state to his eldest son and co-emperor, John VIII, who was more war-hawkish towards Edirne. With political uncertainty surrounding Murad's ascension, Byzantium launched the first salvo in open hostilities by releasing Mustafa Çelebi and Junayd Bey from their exile on Lemnos, as the Ottoman claimant promised the Gallipoli Peninsula to Constantinople in return for military assistance against Murad. By the fall of 1421, Gallipoli and large parts of Ottoman Thrace quickly fell to the rebel prince, while the Karamanids used the occasion of Ottoman instability to reoccupy Agadir, Akşehir and Beyşehir. As Murad II was in Bursa, busy recruiting an army for the upcoming wars, his Grand Vizier Bayezid Pasha, who was already stationed in Edirne, met the forces of Mustafa near the village of Sasladera near...
Yeah, okay. Okay, I think that was pretty dumb of Rome to, like... You're not really in a position to be war hawkish, like, you know what I mean? Like, I think that was really dumb of the Romans. You know, I think they're biting off more than they can chew with this whole, okay, let's keep Mustafa here. Like, they're trying to make power moves, you know what I mean? And they're not really strong enough to be making those power moves and angering people. And I guess they're backing a horse, hoping to gain more out of it, but they're backing the wrong horse. You know what I mean? And all it will result in is them being besieged. Like, they're once again kind of shooting themselves in the foot. So like I said, I'm like, yeah, I think the Romans are just... are poking the bear, if you would. And I don't think that was very wise of them. But I'll say, though, once again, things are looking really bad for Murad. So yeah.
Near the Thracian Aegean coast. Nonetheless, due to a series of mass defections of his Capiculu ranks to the rebel prince, the Ottoman Grand Vizier was captured and beheaded on the insistence of Junayd Bey. Upon his victory at Sasladera, Mustafa Çelebi entered the Ottoman capital of Edirne and proclaimed himself as Sultan of Rumelia in front of roaring crowds. Many Ottoman peasants of the local region, and many in the ranks of the Capiculu, had felt alienated by the pro-Turkoman policies of Mehmed I and his brutal suppression of Bedreddin's rebellion, and so favoured his alleged younger brother Mustafa instead of his son Murad. However, almost immediately after his initial victory, the newly crowned rebel sultan made a multitude of political miscalculations. He first reneged on his promise of ceding the Gallipoli Peninsula to Constantinople, and then began an unpopular invasion of the Anatolian territories under Murad's control. By January of 1422, Mustafa's 17,000-strong army began to besiege Bursa, much to the annoyance of his Capiculu contingent, who instead wished to be stationed in the Balkans and not fight in Anatolia. With Junayd Bey abandoning him to reclaim his former domains around Smyrna and losing fiscal assistance from Constantinople, Mustafa's army began mass defecting to Murad, which resulted in the latter efficiently routing the former's army near the town of Ulubat. With Sultan Murad hotly pursuing him into Europe, and effectively losing his entire army during the military campaign, the rebel sultan retreated back to Edirne and collected the Ottoman treasury to make a last stand in Wallachia. However, Mustafa Çelebi, the last living son of the Thunderbolt, was captured by Murad's agents on his journey north and was later executed, thus bringing an end to the Ottoman civil war. With the death of Mustafa Çelebi, Sultan Murad II turned his full attention and wrath on the Byzantines for instigating the recent civil war in the first place.
Yep, like I said, the Byzantines, I think, that was really dumb of them to be getting too involved. Like, they were definitely biting off more than they could chew there. They were getting so involved with the Ottoman power struggles and whatnot, and definitely probably felt like they could due to the weakened Ottoman position. But, yeah, that wasn't the smartest idea. And now they're about to get besieged again.
Place, officially declaring war on Constantinople. While regional Ottoman marcher lords swiftly seized Nicomedia and Byzantine settlements in Thessaly, Murad and his new Grand Vizier, Jandali Ibrahim Pasha, began the dual sieges of Constantinople and Thessalonica. Despite his youth, Murad had already gained much-needed military experience during his father's reign and the recent Ottoman civil war, so the young sultan was determined to follow in the footsteps of his grandfather by besieging the capital of the Romans. For 63 days, Murad II rained hell upon Constantinople, as for the first time, cannons and other explosives were used to breach the Theodosian walls.
Oh no, they have freaking artillery, holy crap. Oh my gosh.
An eyewitness of the siege, John Cananos, tells how the Sultan built an immense rampart of earth from the Sea of Marmara to the Golden Horn. From this, his troops discharged volleys of fire and stones from catapults against and over the land walls, and thus large parts of the suburbs of the capital were burnt down. A much revered imam in the Ottoman camp called Sheikh Bukhari, who claimed descent from the Prophet Muhammad, had foretold that Constantinople would fall on the 24th of August, and so the main Ottoman assault was therefore made on that day. A long and bitter battle for possession of the walls followed. However, the determined defenders of the city proved steadfast in their battlements, as they...
Okay, John Cananos attributes the Ottoman failure to a miracle by citing the appearance of Saint Mary's silhouette on the walls that demoralized the besiegers. I actually heard of that, yeah.
They repulsed wave after wave of Ottoman attacks on the walls. While Murad was occupied with Constantinople, developments coming out of Anatolia would force him to lift the siege of the Byzantine capital. The Sultan's younger half-brother, the 13-year-old Shahzada Mustafa, better known in Ottoman historiography as Little Mustafa, had revolted and seized Nicaea with the military assistance of the Jandarid, Karamanid and Gurmianid beyliks. The Sultan's other two younger brothers, Shahzadis Mahmud and Yusuf, were also released into Anatolia by Manuel II in an attempt to stir up even more civil strife in the region. Lastly, Junayd Bey had recaptured Smyrna and once more re-established the Aydinid Beylik. With his eastern holdings in open anarchy and little progress being made to breach the Theodosian walls, the Sultan of the Ottomans abandoned his siege on Constantinople.
Frickin' the Romans, man, they were trying their hardest with... I will say that's a pretty shrewd move, releasing so many, claimants and whatnot to help stir, unease in Anatolia. Pretty smart, but once, like, if everything is united once again, you become the first enemy, So once again, like, man, the Romans keep getting besieged and saved this entire series. Like, they could drink every time the Romans are besieged in this series.
And crossed into Anatolia. Catching Little Mustafa off guard, Murad swiftly seized Nicaea and executed his rebel half-brother before also capturing and detaining his other two younger brothers, Mahmud and Yusuf, in Bursa. The pair would die upon a...
Okay, Murad II most likely had his brothers blinded before detaining them in Bursa. Ugh.
Plague outbreak in the former Ottoman capital in 1429. Following his war effort against the Turkic beyliks of Anatolia, many of which supported Little Mustafa's rebellion, Murad invaded and vassalized the Jandarids once more, with the marriage of his sister, Selçuk Hatun, to the heir apparent of the beylik, while he himself married the daughter of Isfendiyar Bey, Hatice Halime Hatun. Meanwhile, with Mehmet II Bey's sudden death during his siege on Antalya against the Tüke Beylik, his eldest son and presumed heir, Ibrahim II Bey, took control of the Karamanid throne and resumed peace talks with Murad. In return for Agadir, Akshehir and Beyshehir, the new Karamanid ruler married another sister of the Ottoman Sultan, Ilaldi Sultan Hatun, and peace between Edirne and Konya was once again re-established. Being childless, the ruler of the Gurmiyanids, Yakub II Bey, surrendered his domains to Murad, while Menteşe and the Teke Beyliks were fully annexed into the Ottoman Sultanate. Lastly, Junayd Bey, the former ruler of the Aydinids, who had defied Ottoman rule for over 2 decades, had been defeated by the local Ottoman governors of the region in a partnership with the Genoese and was beheaded by 1425, resulting in the complete annexation of the short-lived re-established Aydinid Beylik.
Holy crap. So once again, Murad is setting things right, and I'm assuming the Romans are completely screwed. So we'll probably see more of that tomorrow.